To what extent was the Korean War a result of the different ideologies in each nation, and what were the effects of foreign superpowers stepping in? Well, the Korean War officially began on June 25, 1950. The conflict began much earlier. A real first date to which we can tie the war would be the disbandment of the Japanese Empire and the splitting of Korea. In August 1945, Korea was officially split into two. The northern USSR by Communist Nation, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, and in the south there was the US-backed Democratic Capitalist Republic of Korea, ROK. Straight away, you can spot reasons for both of these countries waging war on one another. First off, they have opposing ideologies, and second, they have opposing superpowers backing them. Who was the aggressor? Now knowing the two sides, who first engaged in conflict? If we go by what most popular historical sources say, and what the people in power want you to think, the USSR is to blame. Of course, it's the USSR. They're the bad guys. Like, for real. I hate the USSR for being the aggressors in the Korean War. Okay, now let's see what the atrocious things that the USSR has committed. Yes, they withdrew all their troops from the DPRK after they democratically elected their ruler? Wait, what? No, this can't be. Let's go read a bit more. Surely the USSR did something terrible. Interesting. Here it states that, in fact, the US put in a puppet state and not the USSR, and that the puppet state was a policeman at that. If you happen to be a communist, Marxist, or question anything that the government told you, you'd be shot dead, or you'd happen to go missing. According to the classified CIA document, over 500,000 people went missing in the first 5 years after the installation of the police state. The United States, the US and the puppet government were doing what they thought was best for the country. Alright, of course, they were doing the best they could, right? After even the majority of the people were against Syngman Lee and were for a united Korea under the flag of the People's Republic, or the TPRK. But if that wasn't enough of a hint, surely the armed partisans were, right? Well, it seems it wasn't. And now, due to the massive measurements that the US put into spreading propaganda and winning the war, the world thinks the USSR and China and the TPRK are the aggressors who invaded South Korea. Timeline and a quick summary of the war. As previously stated, the first major event of the war occurred on September 2nd, 1945, with Japan's surrender at the end of World War II. As soon as the Korean peninsula was freed, two visible sides appeared: the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the north, DPRK, and the Republic of Korea in the south. After some small border disputes, the South Korean troops aggravated the North Korean troops on the 30th parallel. The North, with confirmation from their partner, the USSR, invaded South Korea. In this, they had the set goal of freeing the people of ROK from their oppressive police and puppet state. Luckily for the Korean people, the Korean People's Army, the North Korean Army, the Southern Korean people were actually happy to be under control and were actually on their side. They had been on strikes, rioted, and even began setting up their own partisan military groups to fend off the American puppeteers. This went all well for the Korean People's Army until they reached Busan, where the US had proper bases set up and the KPA couldn't pass through. Soon thereafter, the South got UN support, which landed in a weak spot behind the KPA's back. With the help of these reinforcements and the UN, the Southern force was able to push the KPA's back to the Yellow River. From then on, China stepped in. China, not being too fond of how close the US had gotten to it, stepped into the ring and smacked the Southern troops around back to the 30th parallel, where both sides would stay for a while till finally signing an armistice. In this armistice, they set up the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. So, how has this changed our world? Well, first off, the set up several future puppet wars between the USSR and the USA. It is a clear and definitive physical border between the Koreas. Now, Korean families have no way of contacting one another and intermingling. Additionally, the propaganda being spread by each side is most probably making each side hate the other. Importantly, from this war, we were shown how far the US can and will go to suppress and get rid of communism. They set up a proper police state to get rid of anything communist related, even though everybody who was in their cities was actually for it. The majority of the people were actually actively protesting against the government. And by far the most important thing that we can take away from this war is the amount of lying and propaganda being spread in the modern world. Even though we have proper articles and declassified information to have factual information which tells the narrative in an unbiased manner, we will still be the most popular and easier to find source. For example, when you search for who began the Korean War, every source will state the DPRK. Even though if you dig into historical and governmental files, you'll see that, in fact, the stemming from all these searches is a white lie. In all the sources, it states the North Korean soldiers invaded the South, when in fact, for a while, the DPRK was trying to unite the Koreas through diplomacy, and only invaded after the Southern side started attacking them at the 38th parallel. Now let's quickly backtrack to our initial question. To what extent was the Korean War a result of the different ideologies in each nation, and what were the effects of foreign superpowers stepping in? Well, without the US stepping in, there would have probably not have been a division in the Koreas. The Korea would have been probably united under the DPRK. Now, if China would have stepped in, then the entirety of Korea would have been united under the ROK leadership. In general, the brief answer to this question is that the Korean peninsula would have been united under one government if no global superpowers would have stepped in, and the Cold War would have been delayed by at least a few years.